Mr. Phillip was a man of remarkable integrity and kindness, a teacher whose influence spanned far beyond the walls of his modest classroom. He lived in Calabar, a bustling city, in a small two-room apartment with his wife Ada and their 3 children. Despite their humble living conditions, the Phillips were happy, their home filled with laughter and love. Mr. Phillip was known as the teacher who molded leaders. Kings, governors, ministers, presidents, doctors, and countless others had passed through his classroom, guided by his steady hand and kind heart. Philip was respected by all who knew him, but his life took a tragic turn when he fell ill. The sickness began as a persistent cough, something that seemed minor at first, but it soon turned into a debilitating condition. His strength faded, and before long he could no longer teach. With his illness came financial hardship. He could no longer provide for his family, and the burden of supporting the household fell to Ada. She tried her best, running her small provisions store, but the business began to crumble. She spent more time caring for her sick husband, and without her full attention, the business slowly fell apart. Ada was a resilient woman, but even her spirit began to falter as the weight of their circumstances grew heavier. She would wake up every morning before dawn, preparing whatever goods she could sell in the market. The days were long, and her hands grew calloused from the hard work. She carried the pain of watching her husband, a man who had once been so full of life and passion for teaching, now bedridden and helpless. The children, too, felt the strain. Chitty, the eldest, tried to help his mother by running errands and looking after his younger siblings, but there was only so much a young boy could do. Despite all the people Mr. Phillip had helped over the years, no one came to their aid. The government officials he had once lectured, the colleagues who had worked alongside him, and even his former students who had become wealthy and powerful, all seemed to have forgotten him. The promises of help never materialized, and the Phillip family found themselves alone in their struggle. Ada wrote letters, hoping that someone would remember the man who had given so much to the community, but the letters went unanswered. The rent for their 2-room apartment went unpaid for months, and the landlord, who had once been understanding, finally lost patience. He evicted them, forcing the family out onto the streets. The day they were evicted was one that Ada would never forget. The landlord arrived with 2 men, their expressions cold and indifferent. They gave Ada only a few hours to gather their belongings. The children cried as their few possessions were thrown out onto the street. Ada tried to remain strong for them, but the pain of losing their home was too much to bear. They had nowhere to go, and the streets of Calabar were unforgiving. They found temporary shelter under a bridge, using old blankets to keep warm at night. The city that had once been their home now seemed like a hostile place, filled with people who looked the other way as they passed by. Homeless and desperate, Mr. Phillip's health deteriorated rapidly. Ada did everything she could, but there was little she could do without money or support. The children watched as their father grew weaker, their bright eyes filled with fear and confusion. Phillip, once a pillar of strength, was now a shadow of his former self. He had always been a proud man, never wanting to burden others with his troubles, but now he was completely dependent on Ada and the children. The pain in his chest grew worse with each passing day, and he knew that his time was running out. One cold night, as the family huddled together for warmth, Mr. Phillip passed away quietly. Ada held his hand until his last breath, tears streaming down her face. The children, too young to fully understand the finality of death, clung to their mother, their sobs echoing in the darkness. The man who had given so much to others was left with nothing in his time of need. There was no funeral, no gathering of friends and family to honor his life. They had no money for a proper burial, and Ada was forced to bury her husband in a simple grave, marked only by a small wooden cross. After his death, the news of Mr. Phillip's passing spread across the city. People suddenly remembered the good man who had shaped so many lives. They spoke of his honesty, his hatred for corruption, and his dedication to his students. He was celebrated as a hero, and those who had once ignored his suffering now wanted to honor his memory. A grand funeral was arranged, and Phillip was laid to rest in a golden casket, a symbol of the respect that the community now wished to show him. The funeral was a grand affair, attended by many of the powerful individuals who had once sat in Philip's classroom. They spoke of his virtues, his dedication to education, and his impact on their lives. The irony was not lost on Ada, who stood at the back of the crowd, her face lined with grief and exhaustion. She listened as they praised her husband, their words empty to her ears. Where had these people been when Philip had needed them? Where had their support been when her children had gone to bed hungry, or when they had been forced out of their home? But even in death, there was no peace for Mr. Phillip. Thieves, drawn by the lure of the golden casket, broke into his grave and stole it. The family, who had already suffered so much, were left with nothing but the pain of seeing their loved one's memory desecrated. The golden casket, meant to be a symbol of honor, was gone, and with it, the empty promises of those who had once celebrated him. The theft of the casket was a final insult, a reminder that even in death, the poor were not afforded dignity. Philip's story is a painful reminder of the fleeting nature of praise and the hypocrisy of those in power. He was a man who dedicated his life to teaching, to molding the future leaders of his country. Yet when he needed help, no one came. His wife Ada, left alone to care for their children, was forced to endure the loss of her husband, her home, and her dignity. The wealthy students he had once taught, who now lived in comfort and luxury, offered nothing but empty words. In the end, Philip was remembered as a good man, a man who hated corruption and cheating, but his legacy was marred by the indifference of those who could have helped. Ada continued to struggle after Philip's death. With no home and no source of income, she did whatever she could to keep her children fed. She took on menial jobs, cleaning houses and washing clothes for a few coins. The children, once full of life and dreams, grew quiet and withdrawn. Chitty, who had always looked up to his father, now carried the weight of responsibility on his small shoulders. He would often go out to the market, hoping to find work, but opportunities were scarce for a boy his age. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Ada's body grew weary from the endless work, but her spirit remained unbroken. She was determined to see her children through this difficult time. She found solace in the small moments, when her children smiled, when they shared a meal together, no matter how meager, and when they remembered Philip's stories and laughed at his jokes. It was in these moments that she found the strength to keep going. Chitty, too, found ways to contribute. He started helping an old fruit vendor in the market. The vendor, a kind old man named Papa Ocone, took pity on Chitty and allowed him to help sell fruits in exchange for a few pieces of fruit to take home. It wasn't much, but it was something. Chitty worked diligently, learning the ways of the market, the hustle and the barter, the art of negotiation. Papa Ocone became a mentor of sorts to the young boy, teaching him not just about selling fruits, but about life, resilience, and hope. Meanwhile, Ada found work cleaning a small guest house on the outskirts of Calabar. The work was grueling, and the pay was barely enough to buy food for the family, but it was better than nothing. She would walk miles each day to get to the guest house, her feet aching by the time she returned. Despite the exhaustion, she always greeted her children with a smile, hiding her pain behind a mask of strength. The children, though young, could sense their mother's struggle, and they did their best to help in whatever way they could. The youngest of the children, Ifyananya, would often sit beside her mother at night, combing her hair and singing softly to her. It was her way of comforting Ada, of showing her that they were in this together. Ada would close her eyes, listening to her daughter's soft voice, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed a little lighter. Ifyananya's innocence and love were a source of great comfort to Ada, a reminder that despite everything, there was still beauty in the world. The middle child, Emeka, found solace in drawing. He would use whatever scraps of paper he could find, using pieces of charcoal to sketch scenes from their past. Images of their father teaching in the classroom, their old apartment, the market where Ada used to sell her goods. His drawings were simple, but they carried a depth of emotion that spoke to the pain and the hope that still lingered in his heart. Ada kept each drawing, treasuring them as reminders of the love that still bound their family together. The people of Calabar, too, began to take notice of the Phillip family's struggle. There were a few who, though they couldn't offer much, tried to help in small ways. Mama Bassie, who ran a small food stall in the market, would often give Chitty a bowl of soup at the end of the day. "For your mother and siblings," she would say, pressing the warm bowl into his hands. It wasn't charity, it was solidarity, a recognition of the strength that the family had shown in the face of adversity. Despite the hardship, the Phillips found ways to survive. They were bound by their love for each other and by the memory of Philip, whose spirit seemed to guide them even in his absence. Ada often spoke to her children about their father, reminding them of his values, his kindness, and his unwavering belief in doing what was right. "Your father was a great man," she would say, her voice filled with pride. "Not because of what he had, but because of who he was. Always remember that." One day, as Ada was cleaning the guest house, she overheard a conversation between two guests. They were discussing a new community center that was being built in Calabar, a place that would offer free education and vocational training for underprivileged children. Ada's heart skipped a beat at the thought. She knew that education was the key to a better future for her children, and she was determined to give them that opportunity. Ada wasted no time. She approached the project coordinator, a young woman named Ngozi, and explained her situation. Ngozi listened intently, her eyes filled with compassion. She had heard of Mr. Phillip, the teacher who had shaped so many lives, and she was moved by Ada's story. "Bring your children," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We will find a way to help them." For the first time in a long while, Ada felt a glimmer of hope. She took Chitty, Emeka, and Ifyananya to the community center, where they were welcomed with open arms. The children were enrolled in the educational programs, and Ada was given a small job helping to clean the center. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a chance for her children to learn, to grow, and to build a future that Philip would have been proud of. The community center became a second home for the Phillips. The children thrived in their new environment, their laughter once again filling the air. Chitty showed a talent for mathematics. Emeka's drawings began to fill the walls of the center, and Ifyananya's sweet voice could often be heard singing during the afternoon breaks. Ada watched her children with pride, her heart swelling with hope. They had been through so much, but they had survived. They had found a way forward, and Philip's legacy lived on in their strength and determination. Philip's story may have ended in tragedy, but his spirit continued to inspire those who knew him. The community center, now named Philip's Place in his honor, became a beacon of hope for many families in Calabar. It was a place where children could learn, where dreams could be nurtured, and where the values that Philip had lived by, kindness, integrity, and resilience, were passed on to the next generation. Ada knew that Philip would have been proud, not just of their children, but of the community that had finally come together to honor his memory in the best way possible. And so, despite the pain, despite the loss, the Phillips found a way to carry on. They had each other, they had hope, and they had the memory of a man who had given everything for others. Philip's life was a testament to the power of love, and his legacy would continue to shape the lives of those he had touched for many years to come. Ada's involvement at Philip's Place grew over time. She became more than just a cleaner. She became an integral part of the community center. The children and families who came to the center often sought her advice, and she found herself stepping into a role similar to her late husband's, guiding, teaching, and offering comfort to those in need. She taught the children how to read, helped them with their homework, and shared her own experiences to inspire resilience. Ngozi noticed Ada's natural ability to connect with the children and offered her a position as an assistant teacher. Though the pay was still modest, it was a step up from cleaning, and it gave Ada a renewed sense of purpose. She was now actively contributing to the growth and education of not just her own children, but many others who needed guidance. The respect she received from the children and their parents filled her with a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. Chitty, Emeka, and Ifyananya also flourished in the nurturing environment of Philip's Place. Chitty's talent for mathematics caught the attention of one of the volunteer tutors, a retired engineer named Mr. Okoro. Mr. Okoro took Chitty under his wing, mentoring him and providing him with advanced books to study. Chitty's determination and intelligence reminded Mr. Okoro of his younger self, and he was eager to help the boy achieve his full potential. Under Mr. Okoro's guidance, Chidi began to dream of becoming an engineer, a goal that had once seemed impossible. Emeka's artistic abilities also began to attract attention. His drawings, which had once been simple sketches on scraps of paper, had grown more detailed and expressive. He started painting murals on the walls of Phillip's place, transforming the community center into a vibrant and colorful space. His art depicted scenes of hope, resilience, and community, images of children playing, families supporting each other, and a brighter future. The murals became a source of pride for everyone at the center, and Emeka found a sense of purpose in using his talent to bring joy to others. Ifunanya, the youngest, continued to charm everyone with her singing. Her voice was pure and filled with emotion, and she often performed at events held at Phillip's place. Her songs, many of which were inspired by her father's teachings and her mother's strength, moved those who heard them. Ngozi arranged for Ifunanya to receive formal music lessons from a local teacher who volunteered at the center. Ifunanya's confidence grew with each lesson, and she began to dream of becoming a singer, using her voice to tell stories and uplift others. The community center became a symbol of what could be achieved when people came together for a common cause. It wasn't just a place for education. It was a place where lives were transformed, where hope was restored, and where the values that Mr. Phillip had stood for were kept alive. Ada often found herself overwhelmed with gratitude, not just for the opportunities her children were receiving, but for the sense of belonging that had been restored to her family. One day, Ada was approached by a local journalist who had heard about Phillip's place and the story behind it. The journalist, a young woman named Amara, wanted to write an article about the community center and the legacy of Mr. Phillip. Ada was hesitant at first, but Ngozi encouraged her to share their story. Amara spent several days at Phillip's place, talking to Ada, the children, and others who had been impacted by the center. When the article was published, it touched the hearts of many in Calabar and beyond. It spoke of Mr. Phillip's dedication to education, his untimely death, and the struggles that Ada and her children had faced. It also highlighted the resilience of the family and the community that had come together to honor Phillip's memory. The response was overwhelming. Donations began to pour in, and offers of support came from people who had been moved by the story. With the additional funds, Phillip's place was able to expand its programs. They added a small library, a computer lab, and a vocational training center for older children and adults. Ada, now a full-time teacher at Phillip's place, took on the role of coordinator for the new vocational programs. She worked tirelessly to ensure that those who came to the center not only received an education but also learned skills that would help them build better lives for themselves and their families. The story of Phillip's place became a beacon of hope, not just for the people of Calabar, but for many others who heard about it. It was a story of resilience, of community, and of the power of love and education to change lives. Ada often thought of Phillip during quiet moments, when the children were busy learning, when the laughter of the community filled the air, or when she saw her own children thriving. She knew that Phillip's dream of making a difference had not died with him. It had only just begun. Years later, as Chidi stood on the stage at his high school graduation, he looked out at the crowd and saw his mother, his siblings, and Ngozi sitting together, beaming with pride. He was the valedictorian of his class, and as he began his speech, he spoke of his father, a man who had given everything for his family and his community. He spoke of the lessons his father had taught him, of the strength of his mother, and of the community that had lifted them up when they had nothing. He dedicated his achievements to Phillip, the teacher who had inspired not just him but countless others. Emeka and Ifunanya sat beside their mother, their hearts swelling with pride as they listened to their brother speak. Ada's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of joy. She had fought so hard for this moment, and now, seeing her children succeed, she knew that every sacrifice had been worth it. Phillip's legacy lived on in each of them, in Chidi's determination, in Emeka's creativity, and in Ifunanya's voice. The story of Mr. Phillip, once a tale of loss and hardship, had become a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of love. And so, the Phillips continued to grow, to learn, and to inspire others. Phillip's place thrived, touching the lives of many families, and ensuring that no one who walked through its doors would ever feel alone. Ada knew that Philip was watching over them, his spirit alive in every laugh, every lesson, and every act of kindness. His life had been a testament to the power of education, and through Philip's place, that power continued to change the world, one child at a time. In the end, Mr. Phillip's life was celebrated not in gold or riches, but in the smiles of children who learned to dream again, in the warmth of a community that chose to uplift each other, and in the strength of a family that refused to give up. Philip's legacy was not buried in a grave. It lived on in every life he touched, in every heart he inspired, and in every hope he ignited. His story was one of love, unbreakable, unwavering, and forever shining brightly in the hearts of those who knew him. Ada looked around at her children, now standing on the brink of bright futures, and she knew that they would carry Philip's values forward. She whispered a silent thank you to her late husband, feeling his presence around her, guiding them as always. They had faced hardships that could have broken them, but they had emerged stronger, united by the love Philip had given them and the dreams he had inspired. And that, she knew, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. Thanks for watching. If you like this story, please give us a thumbs up and also subscribe to our channel at Season of Love TV1.